The sky above Stormwind split open with a sound like reality itself, screaming in protest. Not the familiar swirling green of a demonic portal, not the shimmering blue of arcane magic, but a jagged tear in the fabric of existence that pulsed with colors that had no name in any language spoken on Azeroth. Citizens in the bustling trade district froze mid-transaction, their eyes drawn upward as something descended through the impossible wound in the sky. A figure bathed in golden light, muscular and perfect, draped in a pristine white cape that billowed majestically despite the absence of wind. The crimson emblem upon his chest gleamed like fresh blood against immaculate fabric that seemed to reject the very concept of dirt or damage. King Anduin Rin stood on the balcony of Stormwind Keep, flanked by his most trusted advisors. Through the ornate spyglass handed to him by High Commander Thrall, he watched the being hover above the Cathedral Square, where hundreds were already falling to their knees. The young king's face, usually so composed despite his youth, betrayed genuine confusion and concern. "What manner of creature is this?" Anduin whispered, lowering the spyglass with trembling hands. "It radiates no fell corruption, no void energy, no death magic I can sense. Yet it descends like a god expecting worship." Beside him, Lady Jaina Proudmoore's fingers traced complex patterns in the air, arcane energy coalescing around her hands as she probed the entity with her considerable magical power. Her expression shifted from curiosity to alarm within seconds. "Whatever it is, it doesn't belong to Azeroth. It's not even from our reality. Where that's, the magical signature is completely alien, almost technological in nature somehow. This is beyond my experience." Prophet Velen, ancient leader of the Draenei, stepped forward, his crystalline staff thrumming with the light. His expression was grave, his eyes distant, as if perceiving something beyond normal sight. "I sense great power in this being, but also great emptiness. It craves something fundamental to its existence. Adoration, perhaps. Validation. It is dangerous not because of what it is, but because of what it desperately needs to be." Below in Cathedral Square, Homelander touched down on the cobblestones with theatrical grace. His enhanced senses took in everything at once: the rapid heartbeats of the assembled crowd, the smell of their fear mixing with awe, the way their pupils dilated as they gazed upon him. It was intoxicating. These people, these strange fantasy creatures, humans, yes, but also dwarves, gnomes, strange blue-skinned beings with tentacles on their faces, they all looked at him with the same desperate hunger for salvation. "People of this realm," he began, his voice carrying across the square with unnatural clarity, bypassing the need for amplification through sheer genetic perfection. "I am Homelander. I have come from beyond your world, beyond your comprehension, to offer you something your kings and priests cannot. True protection, real power, a god who actually answers prayers." The crowd murmured, uncertain. Religious devotion to the light was deeply ingrained in Stormwind's culture. But this being radiated such confidence, such raw power, some began to prostrate themselves more fervently. Others backed away, instinctively sensing wrongness despite the beautiful exterior. A voice cut through the crowd's murmuring. "By what authority do you claim divinity, stranger?" High Inquisitor Whitemane emerged from the cathedral, flanked by a dozen paladins in gleaming armor, their hammers and shields emblazoned with the symbol of the light. Her scarlet tabard marked her as one of the most devoted servants of the light in all of Azeroth. "We serve the light itself, the cosmic force of compassion and justice. We need no false prophets. We," Homelander's smile never wavered, but something cold flashed behind his eyes. "False prophet? I don't ask you to have faith in something you can't see, can't touch, can't prove exists." He floated upward, rising 20 feet in the air without any visible means of propulsion. "No wings, no magic. I am right here, real, tangible. I can demonstrate my divinity right now." His eyes began to glow. Twin beams of coherent crimson energy lanced from his pupils, striking the cobblestones between the High Inquisitor and the crowd. The ancient stone exploded, showering the area with fragments. Several people screamed. The paladins immediately raised their shields, holy light coalescing around them in protective barriers. "That was a warning," Homelander said, his tone still conversational, almost friendly. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I'm here to protect you, but I need you to understand something very important." He descended slowly, his boots touching down directly in front of Whitemane. Even with her considerable height and imposing armor, she barely reached his chin. "I am not asking for your permission. I am not requesting your approval. I am informing you that things are about to change." High Inquisitor Whitemane's hand tightened on her staff, holy energy building around her. She had faced demons, undead, and the corrupted servants of the old gods. She would not be intimidated by this arrogant entity. "The light protects the faithful. You will find us less easily broken than you imagine." She released the pent-up holy energy in a searing blast of pure radiance, enough power to incinerate a pit lord. The beam struck Homelander directly in the chest. For a moment, the entire square was blinded by the intensity of the light. When vision returned, Homelander stood exactly where he had been, completely unharmed. His costume wasn't even singed. He brushed at his chest casually, as if removing dust. "That tickled," he said, then moved faster than human perception could track. His hand closed around Whitemane's throat, lifting her off the ground. The paladins surged forward, but Homelander's free hand swept out, backhanding the nearest one with casual force. The armored warrior flew backward, crashing through a market stall and crumpling in an unconscious heap. His breastplate caved inward. "I'm trying to be nice," Homelander said, his voice taking on an edge of genuine frustration. "Why does everyone in every world insist on testing me? I just want to be appreciated. Is that so wrong?" He studied Whitemane's face as she struggled to breathe, his grip just tight enough to make her point without crushing her windpipe. "You're brave. I respect that. So I'm going to give you a choice. Kneel. Acknowledge me as your superior, and you live. Keep fighting, and I'll show this square what happens to those who reject their savior." The High Inquisitor's hand glowed with desperate holy magic, pressing it against Homelander's arm. The light burned, righteous and pure, but his grip didn't loosen. He didn't even flinch. Her eyes widened with the realization that hit Velen simultaneously from his vantage point in the keep. This being wasn't evil in the way demons were evil. It wasn't corrupted by void or fel. It was simply empty. A vast, bottomless need wrapped in invulnerable flesh. The light had nothing to purge because there was no corruption, only absence. "Never," Whitemane gasped out. Homelander sighed, genuine disappointment crossing his perfect features. "Wrong answer." He threw her, not toward the ground but upward, launching her like a missile toward the keep itself. She screamed, tumbling through the air, and would have died upon impact with the stone walls had Velen not been prepared. The ancient prophet's staff blazed with power, creating a cushion of crystalline light that caught the High Inquisitor and gently lowered her to the balcony. "He must be stopped," Thrall said, his voice hard as steel. The veteran commander had fought the Burning Legion itself, had seen the worst the cosmos had to offer. "Assemble the 7th Legion. Full combat deployment. Authorization to use maximum force." Anduin raised a hand, staying the order momentarily. "Wait. We don't understand what we're facing." That being withstood the full power of the light without harm. "He isn't evil in any way we comprehend. He's something else entirely." "Then we adapt," Jaina said, already weaving complex spells, her hands dancing through arcane formulae that would have taken a normal mage hours to construct. "If holy magic doesn't affect him, we try arcane. Fire. Nature. Death. Azeroth has faced countless threats. This is simply one more." In Cathedral Square, Homelander had returned his attention to the crowd, most of whom were now genuinely terrified. Good, he thought. Fear was almost as intoxicating as adoration. It meant they recognized his power, I didn't want to hurt anyone. I was intoxicating Andea, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the district. But you need to understand something. I'm not like your paladins or priests who serve some invisible force. I am real. I am here. And I can do things your light never could. He floated upward again, his cape spreading dramatically behind him. Watch. His eyes glowed red, and twin beams swept across the sky, spelling out his name in burning letters that hung in the air. Homelander. The crowd gasped, some in awe, others in horror. I can fly. I can see through walls. I can hear a whispered prayer from miles away. I am everything your gods promised to be but never were. And all I ask in return is simple recognition of what I am. Worship me, and I will protect this city like it's never been protected before. Reject me, and well, you saw what happened to your High Inquisitor. The sound of marching boots echoed through the streets. The 7th Legion was deploying. Hundreds of Stormwind's finest soldiers in full-plate armor, mages in their distinctive robes, sharpshooters with their rifles, and engineers with their siege weapons. They surrounded Cathedral Square in a matter of minutes, creating a perimeter with military precision that spoke of decades fighting the Horde and worse threats. Commander Marcus Jonathan, a veteran of countless campaigns, stepped forward, his voice amplified by a gnomish device. Entity, by order of King Anduin Rin, you are commanded to surrender yourself for examination. Azeroth has laws, and you will be held accountable for your assault on the High Inquisitor. Resist, and we will employ lethal force. Homelander descended, landing on the cathedral steps where he could be clearly seen by all the assembled soldiers. He crossed his arms, his posture casual despite being surrounded by an army. Lethal force? Really? Did your king not see what just happened? Your holy magic didn't even scratch me. What makes you think your little army can do any better? We shall see, Jonathan replied, and gave the signal. Mages along the perimeter released their prepared spells simultaneously. Fireballs the size of wagons, lances of pure frost that could freeze a dragon, arcane missiles that could pierce reinforced steel, all converging on Homelander's position from a dozen directions at once. The cathedral steps exploded in a maelstrom of magical energy, the combined assault enough to level a small fortress. When the smoke cleared, Homelander stood amidst the rubble, his costume still pristine, his hair still perfectly styled. He looked down at himself, then up at the assembled soldiers, and laughed. The sound was beautiful and terrible in equal measure, genuine amusement mixed with contempt. Is that all? I've faced worse from a microwave malfunction. He blurred into motion. The soldiers never stood a chance. Homelander tore through their formation with contemptuous ease, each movement precisely calculated to demonstrate overwhelming superiority without immediately killing everyone. Rifles fired uselessly, their bullets bouncing off his body like raindrops. Swords shattered against his skin. Magical shields were torn apart as he simply flew through them. He grabbed a siege tank and hurled it 300 yards, watching it crash through a building in a spray of stone and timber. Within 3 minutes, the 7th Legion's assault had been completely broken. Soldiers lay scattered across the square, most injured but alive. A deliberate choice on Homelander's part. He wanted them to survive, to tell others what they had witnessed. He stood in the center of the devastation, surrounded by broken weapons and groaning wounded, and addressed the city at large. I don't want to be your enemy, he called out, knowing his voice would carry to the keep, to the king himself. I want to be your protector, your champion, the hero this world clearly needs. Look at what just happened. Your army couldn't even slow me down. Imagine what I could do to your actual enemies. The Horde you're always fighting? I could end that war in a day. The demons that keep invading? I'd tear them apart. Any threat to this city would have to go through me first. And as you've just seen, nothing goes through me. On the keep balcony, Anduin watched the devastation with growing horror. Hundreds of his soldiers injured, the Cathedral Square in ruins, and they hadn't even scratched the entity. Jaina stood beside him, her face pale as she watched her most powerful spells deflect harmlessly off Homelander's body. We cannot allow this being to establish dominance, Velen said quietly. If Stormwind falls to him, if he is allowed to position himself as a god protector, the corruption will spread. Not corruption of the body or soul, but something worse. Corruption of will, of independence, of the very spirit that makes mortals capable of growth. Then, what do we do? Anduin asked, his voice strained. Our armies cannot harm him. Our magic is useless. The light itself has no effect. What weapon do we have against something invulnerable? Turalian's expression was grim. We escalate. Call the dragon aspects. Summon champions from across Azeroth. If this entity threatens our world, we respond with everything we have. And if that's not enough? Jaina asked. Silence fell over the balcony, broken only by the distant sounds of Homelander's continued proclamations to the terrified citizens below. In the ruins of Cathedral Square, Homelander was discovering something interesting about this new world. The longer he stood here, the more he could feel something responding to his presence, a sort of ambient energy that permeated everything. It felt similar to the energy that had brought him here in the first place. The strange dimensional rift that had torn him from his own reality during what was supposed to be a simple publicity event. But here, this energy felt alive somehow, conscious, aware. It seemed to resonate with his powers in ways he couldn't quite understand yet. He closed his eyes, extending his senses. His hearing, already capable of detecting a heartbeat from miles away, seemed to extend further here. He could hear conversations happening in the keep itself. He could hear the young king discussing options with his advisors. A smile crossed his face. They were going to escalate, bring in more powerful entities. Good. He wanted to test himself against this world's best. He wanted to prove, once and for all, that he was the apex predator in any reality. A sound caught his attention, different from the groans of wounded soldiers or the frightened murmurs of citizens. It was a roar, deep and primal, coming from the sky itself. Homelander looked up to see something he had never encountered before. A dragon. But not the reptilian creatures of myth from his world. This was something far more magnificent and terrible. Easily 200 feet long, covered in sapphire scales that shimmered with internal magic, with eyes that held ancient intelligence and barely contained fury. The dragon descended in a spiral, landing on the far side of the square with an impact that cracked the cobblestones. When it spoke, its voice resonated with power that made the air itself vibrate. I am Kalecgos, aspect of magic, guardian of Azeroth's arcane forces. You have violated the sovereignty of this realm, harmed its innocent citizens, and declared yourself above the laws that govern all who walk these lands. I offer you one chance. Entity, leave this world now, return to whatever reality spawned you, or face consequences beyond your comprehension. Reversed ever the Consi. Return some things. Consi. Homelander's smile widened into something predatory. Now this is more like it. Finally, something that looks like it might actually be a challenge. He floated upward, rising to meet the dragon's eye level. I'm Homelander, and I'm not going anywhere. In fact, I think I'm going to enjoy making this world mine. Starting with you, big guy. How about you kneel and acknowledge me as your better, and I'll let you keep your dignity. Kalecgos' response was immediate and devastating. His jaws opened, and a torrent of arcane energy poured forth, raw magical power given form and fury. The beam was wide enough to engulf Homelander completely, intense enough that it turned the air itself into plasma. The citizens still remaining in the square fled, shielding their eyes from the terrible radiance. The beam continued for what felt like an eternity, Kalecgos pouring centuries of accumulated magical might into the assault. When he finally ceased, smoke rose from the scorched cobblestones. A crater, 20 feet deep, had been carved into the square. The stone melted to glass at its edges. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from within the smoke, came laughter. Homelander rose from the crater, still hovering, still completely unharmed. His costume remained pristine, his hair still perfect. Only his eyes betrayed his anger, glowing a dangerous crimson. That actually hurt a little, he admitted, his voice cold now, the friendly veneer completely abandoned. Not much, barely a sting really, but more than anything else in this world has managed. Congratulations, dragon. You just made this personal. I'm one of the most failure of face. He vanished in a blur of motion, reappearing instantly beside Kalecgos' massive head. His fist lashed out with all his considerable strength, connecting with the dragon's jaw with a sound like a thunderclap. Kalecgos' head snapped to the side, scales cracking under the impact. The ancient being roared in pain and surprise, something that had rarely happened in thousands of years of existence. He tried to take flight, to gain distance and altitude, but Homelander was faster. He grabbed the dragon's wing, his fingers digging into the membrane, and pulled. The dragon was massive, weighing thousands of tons, but Homelander's strength was beyond conventional physics. He swung Kalecgos like a club, smashing the ancient aspect into the ground with enough force to create seismic shockwaves that shattered windows throughout the trade district. Kalecgos attempted to shift forms, using his mastery of magic to transform into his humanoid shape, but Homelander anticipated the move. The moment the transformation began, he was there, his hand closing around the half-elf throat that was forming. He slammed Kalecgos against the cathedral wall hard enough to crack the ancient stone. You know what your problem is? Homelander asked, his face inches from Kalecgos' struggling form. You're used to being at the top of the food chain. Used to other beings fearing you, respecting you. Well, here's a news flash, dragon. There's a new apex predator in town, and his name is Homelander. Kalecgos gathered what power he could, his hands glowing with arcane energy, and blasted Homelander point blank in the chest. The force should have atomized a lesser being. Instead, it pushed Homelander back perhaps 10 feet. The aspect of Magic's eyes widened with comprehension and horror. This entity wasn't just resistant to magic, it was operating on entirely different principles. His powers weren't magical in nature. They were something else. Something that bypassed all of Azeroth's conventional rules. Impressive deduction, Homelander said, having literally read the realization on Kalecgos' face. I'm not from your reality. Remember? Your magic, your light, your precious cosmic forces. They're all just local rules. And I don't play by your rules. His eyes blazed, and twin beams of energy struck Kalecgos in the chest. The dragon aspect screamed, a sound that shook the entire city, as the heat vision burned through his magical defenses like they didn't exist. His ancient scales, capable of turning aside demon blades and titan-forged weapons, blackened and cracked under the assault. Homelander didn't stop until Kalecgos collapsed, reverting fully to his draconic form, grievously wounded but alive. Consider this a lesson, Homelander said, loud enough for his voice to carry to the keep, to the king and his advisors watching in horror. Send your armies, send your dragons, send your mages and paladins, and whatever else you have, none of it matters. I am beyond you, above you, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner we can move past this unfortunate violence and into a new era of prosperity under my protection. He surveyed the devastation around him. The wounded soldiers, the destroyed square, the smoking form of a dragon aspect brought low. It should have felt triumphant. He had proven his superiority completely, yet something nagged at him, a hollow feeling he recognized from his old world. Fear and defeat in the eyes of those who witnessed his power, but no love, no genuine adoration, just terror masked as compliance. Before he could dwell on this, a new sound reached his ears. Drums. War drums. Rhythmic and primal. Coming from outside the city walls. Homelander's enhanced vision pierced through stone and distance, seeing what was approaching. An army, but not human. Green-skinned warriors, massive and brutish, riding wolves and accompanied by towering figures covered in tribal tattoos. The Horde had arrived, drawn by the commotion in their enemy's capital city. Thrall, war chief of the Horde, stood at the head of his warriors on a hill overlooking Stormwind. Beside him were some of the most powerful individuals on Azeroth. Vol'jin, master of shadow and voodoo, Cairney Bloodhoof, wise chieftain of the Tauren, and Sylvanas Windrunner, the Banshee Queen herself. They had come expecting to find Stormwind weakened, possibly even under attack by demons or old gods. What they found was somehow worse, a completely unknown entity that had single-handedly devastated the city's defenses and defeated a dragon aspect. "What manner of creature is that?" Vol'jin asked, his tusks clicking thoughtfully as he studied the distant figure hovering above Cathedral Square. Thrall's connection to the elements gave him insight beyond normal sight. He could feel the spirits of wind and water recoiling from Homelander's presence, not from evil or corruption, but from fundamental wrongness, something that doesn't belong to our world. The elements themselves reject his existence here. He is anathema to the natural order. "Then we destroy him," Sylvanas said simply, her voice carrying the hollow tone of undeath. "Whatever threatens the balance of Azeroth threatens both our peoples. The Horde and Alliance may be enemies, but we face existential threats together." "This qualifies." Cairney nodded his massive horned head. "The spirits of my ancestors whisper warnings. This being brings not conquest in the traditional sense, but something worse, subjugation of will itself. It seeks not to rule through strength, but to replace purpose with dependency." Thrall raised his hand, and the Horde forces began their march towards Stormwind's gates. In the keep, Anduin watched their approach with mixed feelings. The Horde was supposed to be his enemy, yet here they were, apparently preparing to aid against this greater threat. He made a decision that would have been unthinkable hours ago. "Open the gates," he commanded. "Send word to the Horde. We face a common enemy. Today, we stand together." Homelander watched with interest as the gates of Stormwind opened and the Horde army entered, taking positions alongside the battered Alliance forces. This was unexpected and fascinating. These two factions were apparently mortal enemies, yet they were uniting against him. It was almost flattering. "People of Azeroth," he called out, addressing both armies now. "You don't have to do this. I'm not your enemy. I could be the greatest ally either of your factions has ever known. Think about it. All your wars, all your conflicts, they could end. I could force peace on this world, protect everyone from external threats. All you have to do is acknowledge what you've already seen demonstrated, that I am superior, that I deserve your loyalty and worship." Thrall stepped forward, his doomhammer crackling with elemental energy. "We have faced gods before, entity. The old gods, beings of such power and malevolence that they corrupted the very land itself. We have faced the Burning Legion, demons that sought to unmake reality. We have even stood against the Lich King, death itself given form and purpose. You are powerful, perhaps more powerful than any individual we have encountered. But you make a fundamental mistake." "Oh?" "Enlighten me." "You assume power alone determines worth," Thrall continued. "You demand worship without earning it through deed or sacrifice. You seek adoration without understanding what it means to truly serve those who follow you. You are strong, but you are empty. And Azeroth has a way of teaching the powerful what it means to be humbled." For a moment, genuine rage flashed across Homelander's perfect features. "Humbled? By you? By this backward fantasy world with its orcs and elves and magic tricks? I've heard enough speeches. Let me show you what happens to those who lecture me about humility." He moved with speed that made his previous demonstrations look slow, targeting Thrall directly. But the warchief was prepared. Thrall had fought some of the fastest beings in existence, and while he couldn't match Homelander's speed, he could predict trajectory. He slammed Doomhammer into the ground, and the elements responded to their shaman's call. The earth itself rose up, creating a wall of stone between him and Homelander's charge. The impact as Homelander struck the wall sent shockwaves through the ground. But it bought Thrall the split second he needed. Lightning. True lightning. Not magical imitation, but the wrath of the sky itself, struck Homelander from above. The bolt was directed by Thrall's will, channeled and focused with all his shamanic power. Homelander screamed, not from pain but from surprise. The lightning didn't hurt him, but it did something unexpected. For just a moment, his muscles spasmed, his perfectly controlled flight wavering. He dropped 10 feet before regaining control. But the damage was done. Everyone had seen it. He wasn't completely invulnerable to natural forces. Magic might not harm him, but the raw elements of the world itself could affect him, if only slightly. Interesting, Vol'jin said, his keen eyes catching what had happened. He be resistant to magic, but the natural forces, they work different. Not magic, just the world itself pushing back against what don't belong. Sylvanas drew her bow, but her arrows were not ordinary projectiles. Each was tipped with pure crystallized death magic, harvested from the Shadowlands themselves. She loosed 3 arrows in rapid succession, each one finding its mark on Homelander's body. They didn't penetrate his skin, but where they struck, frost spread, death itself trying to claim what it could not kill. For the first time, Homelander felt cold, actual uncomfortable cold. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, tearing the arrows from his costume and hurling them aside. The frost marks faded quickly, his body rejecting the death magic, but they had existed. More proof that this world's forces could affect him in ways his home reality never could. The combined forces of the Horde and Alliance attacked as one, a coordinated assault that spoke of desperation rather than traditional rivalry. Siege weapons fired, catapults hurling burning pitch and gnomish explosives. Shamans called forth earthquakes and tidal waves of elemental power. Warlocks opened portals to the twisting nether, attempting to suck Homelander into the chaotic dimension between worlds. Priests channeled both light and shadow in complex harmonics designed to disrupt any form of existence. Homelander fought back with increasing frustration. Every attack he launched was devastating, each punch pulverizing armor and flesh, each eye beam cutting through ranks of soldiers. But they kept coming, adapting, learning, and mages began using their spells not to harm him directly, but to manipulate the battlefield, creating ice beneath his feet to disrupt his landings, conjuring illusions to confuse his targeting, using force magic to redirect his own attacks. Rogues appeared and disappeared, not attacking him, but sabotaging his theatrical cape, tangling it in chains and anchors. "Enough!" Homelander roared, his composure completely shattered now. He rose high above the battlefield, his eyes blazing with maximum intensity. He would end this, all of it, with one demonstration of power so absolute that no one would dare challenge him again. His heat vision swept across the assembled armies in a horizontal arc, intending to cut through them like a scythe through wheat. But Jaina Proudmoore was not unprepared. The Archmage had been studying, observing, analyzing every interaction between Homelander and the magical forces of Azeroth. She understood now what he was. Not a magical being, but something that existed on a different fundamental level. His powers weren't magic, they were inherent, biological almost, which meant they operated through different mechanisms. His heat vision was concentrated energy, similar in principle to fire magic, but generated through entirely different means. And if it was similar enough to fire, then it could be countered the same way. As Homelander's beams swept toward the massed armies, Jaina raised her hands and spoke words of power that froze the moisture in the air itself. A wall of ice, hundreds of feet tall and dozens of feet thick, materialized directly in the path of the heat vision. The beam struck the ice and was diffracted, scattered, its deadly focus broken into dozens of weaker beams that carved harmless trenches in the ground. It wasn't a perfect defense. The ice was vaporizing rapidly, but it was enough to protect the soldiers from instant death. Homelander's concentration wavered, shocked that something had actually blocked his attack. In that moment of distraction, Sylvanas acted. The Banshee Queen opened her mouth and released her wail, a sound that existed on the border between life and death. A sonic assault that could shatter minds and break wills. Homelander heard it, and for the first time in his life, he experienced something close to pain that wasn't physical. The wail resonated with frequencies his enhanced hearing couldn't filter out, couldn't protect against. It was sound weaponized beyond anything he had encountered, and it hurt. He clutched his head, his flight pattern becoming erratic. The armies pressed their advantage. Thrall called down another lightning strike. This one even more powerful. Charged with elemental fury, it struck Homelander directly, and this time his muscles locked up for a full 3 seconds. He plummeted from the sky, crashing into the ground hard enough to create a crater. It didn't injure him, but it was humiliating. He scrambled to his feet, his perfect hair disheveled for the first time, dirt on his costume. "You dare!" he screamed, his voice raw with rage and something that might have been fear. "I am Homelander. I am a god. You cannot defeat me with your primitive magic and your pathetic coordination." "We don't need to defeat you," Anduin's voice called out, and Homelander turned to see the young king approaching, flanked by his champions but walking ahead of them unarmed. "We just need you to understand that Azeroth does not bow to tyrants, no matter how powerful. Our world has survived the Sundering, the War of the Ancients, the Burning Crusade, the Cataclysm. We have faced oblivion a dozen times and always found a way to prevail, not through the power of one individual, but through unity, sacrifice, and the unwavering belief that some things are worth fighting for, even in the face of certain death." Homelander stared at the young king, reading his body language, his heartbeat, the micro-expressions that revealed truth from lies. Anduin believed every word he was saying. He genuinely was prepared to die rather than submit. It was infuriating and incomprehensible to Homelander. In his world, everyone had a breaking point, a price at which they would compromise their principles, but this boy king and his people seemed to operate on different logic entirely. "Then you'll die?" Homelander said simply. "All of you. I'll level this city, this entire kingdom. I'll kill everyone who defies me until the survivors understand that I am inevitable." "Perhaps," Anduin replied, his voice steady. "But know this, entity, you may kill us all, but you will never receive what you truly crave. Worship based on fear is hollow. Adoration extracted through terror is meaningless. You will rule over corpses and cowards, but you will never know true loyalty or genuine love. You will be forever empty, no matter how many kneel before you." The words struck deeper than any weapon had. Homelander felt something crack inside him, some fundamental piece of his psychology that had always been fragile, because the young king was right. Everything he had done since arriving in this world, all the demonstrations of power, all the demands for worship, it had only generated fear and hatred, just like in his old world. No matter where he went, no matter what universe he inhabited, the result was the same: isolation dressed up as supremacy. Before he could respond, a new sensation washed over him. The ambient magical energy he had felt since arriving, the thing that had been resonating with his powers, suddenly intensified 1,000-fold. The sky above Stormwind darkened, but not with clouds. Reality itself seemed to fracture, and through the cracks came light of colors that shouldn't exist. A voice spoke, "One Sama, one Sama, one Sama," vast and incomprehensible, speaking all languages and none. "We are the Titans, shapers of worlds, architects of order. This realm is under our protection. Entity from beyond, you have violated the fundamental laws that govern existence. You will be judged." Figures materialized in the sky above the battlefield, so enormous that they dwarfed even the dragon aspects. Beings of pure cosmic energy given form, each one radiating power that made Homelander's abilities seem like parlor tricks by comparison. These were the Titans, the literal architects of Azeroth, beings that existed on a scale beyond mortal comprehension. Homelander looked up at them, and for the first time since arriving in this universe, He felt genuinely small, not afraid, not yet, but aware that he was in the presence of something truly beyond him. His enhanced senses tried to analyze them, to find weaknesses, but there was nothing to analyze. They weren't physical in the way he understood physics. They were concepts given form, order itself made manifest. "You dare judge me?" Homelander called out, his voice smaller than he intended, almost lost in the vastness of the Titan's presence. "I am Homelander. I am power incarnate. You are an anomaly." The Titan Aman'Thul responded, his voice resonating through every molecule of reality. "A statistical impossibility, given consciousness. Your existence violates the fundamental ordering principles of this universe. You do not belong here, and your presence creates instability that threatens the very fabric of our creation." Another Titan, Eonar, spoke with a voice like the birth of stars. "We sense in you great power, but also great emptiness. You seek validation from beings you consider inferior, yet you reject the very connections that would provide meaning to your existence. You are paradox made flesh, and paradoxes cannot be allowed to persist within ordered reality." Homelander's rage, which had been building throughout the battle, finally boiled over completely. "I don't care about your cosmic philosophy. I don't care about your ordered reality. I am what I am, and I won't be erased by oversized, glowing statues who think they're in charge." His eyes blazed red, and he unleashed his heat vision at full power toward Aman'Thul. The twin beams struck the Titan's form and simply stopped, absorbed into the cosmic entity without causing even the slightest reaction. It was as if Homelander had tried to harm the concept of time itself with angry thoughts. "Predictable," Aman'Thul observed. "You respond to perceived threats with violence because violence is the only language you truly comprehend. You claim to seek worship and love, yet you have never learned what those things actually mean. You are a powerful entity, but power without purpose is merely chaos awaiting entropy." The Titan Organon, keeper of knowledge and magic, stepped forward. His form shifted through countless configurations as he analyzed Homelander from every possible angle across multiple dimensions. "Fascinating. Your biology operates on quantum principles foreign to this reality. You manipulate matter and energy through mechanisms that bypass our physical laws entirely. You are not magical, not divine, not demonic. You are simply impossible, a walking violation of everything we established when we ordered this world from chaos." "Then I guess your ordering wasn't as complete as you thought," Homelander shot back. But his bravado was hollow now. He could feel it, the weight of cosmic disapproval pressing down on him from beings that could reshape reality with a thought. Khazgoroth, shaper of earth and mountains, spoke next. "We offer you a choice, anomaly. Leave this reality willingly. Return to your own universe through the rift that brought you here, and we will repair the damage your presence has caused. The people you harmed will be healed, the destruction undone. You will be permitted to leave with your existence intact." "And if I refuse?" Homelander demanded, though he was beginning to realize how futile refusal might be. "Then we will unmake you," Aman'Thul replied simply. "We will unweave the quantum impossibilities that allow your biology to function. We will restore order by eliminating the anomaly. You will cease to exist, not just in this universe, but retroactively. You will never have existed at all. You will never have existed at all. You will never have existed at all. You will never have existed at all." The armies below watched in stunned silence. The Titans had appeared perhaps a dozen times in Azeroth's history, always at moments of absolute crisis. Their presence now confirmed what everyone had suspected. This entity called Homelander represented a threat not just to nations or factions, but to reality itself. Homelander's mind raced. He was cornered, genuinely threatened for perhaps the first time in his existence. These Titans could apparently do what they claimed. He could sense the truth of it, in the way reality itself seemed to bend to their will. But surrender? Leave? Admit defeat? Everything in his psychology rebelled against the concept. "You think you can just erase me?" he said, his voice taking on a desperate edge. I've survived everything. I'm invulnerable. I'm perfect. You can't just make me stop existing. Invulnerability is contextual, Norganon observed. You are invulnerable within the physical laws of your native reality, and resistant to many phenomena in ours. But we do not operate within physical laws, entity. We write them. Your invulnerability means nothing to those who can simply declare that the principles allowing it no longer apply to you. Below, Thrall watched the exchange with growing realization. They're giving him a chance to leave with dignity, to choose exile over obliteration. It's more mercy than he deserves, after what he's done. The Titans see something we cannot, Velen observed, his ancient eyes studying the cosmic beings with reverence. They understand that this entity, for all his power and cruelty, is still fundamentally a victim of his own nature. He was created to be what he is, shaped by forces beyond his control. Never given the chance to choose a different path, they offer him that choice now. Anduin stepped forward, addressing Homelander directly despite the Titan's overwhelming presence. You could accept their offer. Return to your world. Perhaps there, knowing what you know now about your own limitations, you could find a better way. You don't have to be what you've been. The Titans are offering you something rare, a genuine second chance. Homelander looked at the young king, then at the assembled armies, then up at the Titans themselves. Every fiber of his being screamed to fight, to resist, to prove that he couldn't be beaten. But another part of him, the part that had felt the hollowness of fear-based worship, that had recognized the truth in Anduin's earlier words, hesitated. If I leave, he said slowly, what happens to all of this? The people I hurt? The dragon I nearly killed? The city I destroyed? We will restore what was broken, Iona replied, her voice carrying compassion that Homelander had rarely experienced. The wounded will be healed, the dead return to life, the structures rebuilt. It will be as if you never came to this world, though the memories will remain as a lesson for those who lived through it. And in my world? What waits for me there? That is not for us to determine, Amanthul said. We can only send you back to the moment you left. What you do with that second chance is yours to decide. But know this, entity, should you ever attempt to return to Azeroth, should you ever again threaten this ordered reality, we will not offer mercy a second time. Homelander hovered there, suspended between choices, between worlds, between versions of himself. For the first time in his existence, he had to genuinely consider the possibility that he was wrong, that power alone wasn't enough, that being worshipped through fear was worse than not being worshipped at all. But even as he hesitated, something else stirred in the depths of Azeroth. Far beneath the surface, in lightless depths where reality grew thin and madness dwelled, the old gods sensed the presence of the anomaly. Dezoth, the corruptor, the whisper in the darkness, reached out with tendrils of consciousness that existed beyond physical space. It had watched Homelander's arrival, studied his nature, recognized in him a perfect tool. The old gods were beings of chaos, older than the Titans themselves, imprisoned but not powerless. They had spent eons learning to corrupt, to twist, to subvert, and Homelander, with his desperate need for validation and his resistance to conventional magic, represented an opportunity unlike any they had encountered. Asterisk. You don't have to leave. Asterisk. A voice whispered in Homelander's mind, bypassing his ears entirely, speaking directly to his consciousness. Asterisk. You don't have to submit to their cosmic tyranny. I can give you what you truly want. And in DSD, and cosmic tyranny, real power. The kind that even Titans must respect. Asterisk. Rephone Titans. Asterisk. Homelander's eyes widened. Who are you? What are you? The Titans noticed immediately, their attention shifting from Homelander to the source of the whispers. No. Ananine. No. Amanthul said, his voice carrying urgency for the first time. Entity. Do not listen. That is N'Zoth, an old god, a being of pure corruption. It seeks only to use you for its own purposes. Asterisk, they lie, asterisk, the voice continued, seductive and reasonable. Asterisk, they call me corruption, but I offer truth. The truth that power should not be constrained by their arbitrary rules. The truth that you deserve what you seek. I can enhance your abilities, make you truly invulnerable even to them. All I ask in return is a simple favor. Help me break free from my prison, and together we will reshape this world and yours into something worthy of our magnificence. Asterisk. Homelander, no. Anduin shouted, somehow sensing what was happening. The old gods are the ultimate corruptors. They've destroyed civilizations, driven entire races to madness. Whatever it's promising you is a lie, but the damage was done. Homelander's psychology, already fractured by the day's events, found something appealing in N'Zoth's offer. Not submission, not exile, but partnership with something that seemed to understand him, that offered power without the judgment the Titans represented. What would I have to do? He asked, speaking aloud now. Entity, if you accept the old god's bargain, we will be forced to act immediately, Thul warned. We cannot allow an anomaly like you to be weaponized by primordial chaos. Choose now, exile with dignity, or obliteration with the old god's false promises still ringing in your ears. Asterisk. Simply fly downward. Asterisk, N'Zoth whispered. Asterisk, descend to where I am imprisoned. Your unique nature, your immunity to magic, you can pass through wards that have held me for millennia. Free me, and I will grant you power that makes your current abilities seem like nothing. Asterisk. Homelander floated there, caught between cosmic forces beyond his comprehension. The Titans offered him exile, a return to his own world, where he would remain the most powerful being but forever haunted by the knowledge that greater forces existed. N'Zoth offered him enhancement, partnership, the chance to become truly godlike, but at the cost of his already questionable sanity and morality. In that moment, suspended between choices, Homelander finally understood something about himself. He wasn't actually strong. Real strength would be accepting his limitations, choosing growth over power, acknowledging that being the strongest didn't make him the best. But he had never learned real strength. He had only ever learned to take what he wanted through force. He looked down at the assembled armies, at Anduin's pleading expression, at the ruins he had created in his tantrum for recognition. Then he looked up at the Titans, cosmic beings that could erase him with a thought. And finally, he listened to the whisper in his mind, promising him everything he had ever wanted. I'm sorry, he said, though it was unclear who he was apologizing to. Then he dove downward, not toward Stormwind but through it, through the earth itself, his invulnerable body passing through stone and magma like they were air. He dove toward the whispers, toward N'Zoth's prison, toward the choice that felt like victory but was actually damnation. No! The Titans roared in unison, and reality itself screamed in protest as they acted. Their combined power focused on a single point, trying to stop Homelander's descent, trying to obliterate him before he could reach the old god. But his unique nature, his quantum impossibility, made him difficult to target. Their power washed around him, destroying everything nearby but unable to grasp the anomaly itself. Homelander descended through layers of reality, through caverns that had never known light, through spaces where the old gods had been imprisoned by the Titans eons ago. He could feel N'Zoth's presence growing stronger, a vast consciousness that dwarfed even the Titans in its alien nature. Where the Titans represented order, N'Zoth represented entropy and madness given purpose. Asterisk. Yes, asterisk, the old god's voice grew stronger. Asterisk. Come to me, anomaly. Together we will teach the Titans that order is merely slow chaos, that power constrained is power wasted. Asterisk. Homelander crashed through the final barrier, a ward that had held for thousands of years, designed to contain beings of immense magical power. But Homelander wasn't magical, he was something else, and the ward simply couldn't comprehend what he was. It shattered like glass, and suddenly he was in a vast cavern that existed partially outside normal space. Before him was N'Zoth, an entity that hurt to look upon directly. A mass of tentacles and eyes and geometries that violated the laws of physics, each eye containing galaxies of malevolent intelligence. The old god was chained, bound by tangent-forged restraints, but even imprisoned, it radiated power that made Homelander's abilities seem trivial. Asterisk. At last, asterisk. N'Zoth said, its voice no longer a whisper but a thunderous presence in Homelander's mind. Asterisk. The anomaly stands before me. Tell me, creature of impossible biology, do you truly wish to become a god? Not a pretender worshipped through fear, but something genuinely divine. Asterisk. Yes, Homelander said. And in that single word, he sealed his fate. Tentacles lashed out, wrapping around him faster than even his enhanced perception could track. But they didn't harm him, didn't squeeze or crush. Instead, they pulled him closer to the central mass of N'Zoth's form, to a place where an enormous eye stared directly into his soul. Asterisk. Then gaze upon me and be remade. Asterisk. Homelander looked into the eye of N'Zoth, and his mind broke. The old god's consciousness was too vast, too alien, too utterly unlike anything he had ever conceived. It showed him truths about reality that no mortal mind was meant to understand. It revealed the insignificance of his concerns, the pathetic nature of his need for validation, the cosmic joke that was his very existence. And in the breaking of his mind, N'Zoth found purchase. The old god's corruption was not like anything from Homelander's universe. It didn't make him evil in a conventional sense. Instead, it rewrote his priorities, his goals, his entire way of understanding existence. It took his need for worship and amplified it to cosmic proportions. It took his power and enhanced it with abilities drawn from the void itself. It took his already fragile psychology and remolded it into something that could serve N'Zoth's purposes. Above, the Titans felt the moment of corruption occur. It is done, Amantul said, his voice heavy with regret. The anomaly has been claimed by the void. We must contain this now before it spreads. The Titans combined their power, reaching down through the layers of earth, trying to seal the breach that Homelander had created. But N'Zoth was already acting, using its new tool to attack the very foundations of its prison. Homelander, now more puppet than person, his eyes black with void corruption, his body pulsing with energies that hadn't existed in Azeroth since before the Ordering, began to tear apart the tangent-forged chains. His heat vision, now infused with void energy, cut through metal that had been designed to hold an old god. His strength, always considerable, was amplified by N'Zoth's power, allowing him to break restraints that had held for millennia. And his invulnerability meant the prison's defensive mechanisms couldn't stop him. Asterisk. Yes. Asterisk. N'Zoth exulted. Asterisk. Freedom. After so long, freedom. And you, my dear anomaly, shall be my herald. Together we will drown this ordered world in glorious chaos. Asterisk. On the surface, reality began to fracture. Portals opened across Stormwind, pouring forth creatures that shouldn't exist, manifestations of void energy and nightmare-given form. The citizens who had survived Homelander's initial rampage now faced something worse. An old god incursion led by a being that couldn't be stopped by conventional means. Defend the city, Anduin shouted, drawing his sword even as void tendrils erupted from the ground around him. Hold the line! The Titans are working to contain this. We just need to survive until they do. But even as he spoke, Anduin could feel the futility of his words. The Titans were powerful, but they were fighting an old god that had managed to corrupt an anomaly from another reality. The combination was something even they struggled to contain. Thrall called upon the elements, but they recoiled from the void corruption spreading through the ground. Jaina's magic fizzled against the reality-warping energies pouring through the portals. Sylvanas' death magic simply fed the corruption, making it stronger. The combined forces of Azeroth's champions were discovering that some threats were simply too great to face conventionally. In the depths, N'Zoth broke the last chain and rose. The old god's full form was beyond description, a mass of tentacles and eyes and mouths that extended across multiple dimensions simultaneously. It pulled itself up through the earth, collapsing caverns and causing earthquakes that registered across the continent. And at its side flew Homelander, or what Homelander had become. His costume had transformed. The pristine white and red, now a shifting pattern of void black and sickly purple. His cape writhed with a life of its own, each thread actually a tiny tentacle. His eyes, once blue, now swirled with the same chaotic void energy as N'Zoth's countless orbs. He was still powerful, still invulnerable, but he was no longer himself. He was N'Zoth's champion, a puppet dancing on strings he couldn't even perceive. The Titans moved to contain the threat, but they were constrained by a terrible reality. To truly stop N'Zoth now would require unmaking Azeroth itself, destroying the world they had spent eons ordering. And even then, there was no guarantee it would work. Not with the anomaly serving as N'Zoth's shield against their cosmic power. "We must evacuate," Aman'Thul said to his fellow Titans. "We must save what mortals we can, and accept that this world may be lost. The corruption runs too deep now, and the anomaly makes conventional containment impossible." "No." Anduin's voice cut through the chaos, small but determined. The young king stood in Cathedral Square, surrounded by void creatures, his sword glowing with the light even as darkness pressed in from all sides. "We don't give up. Azeroth has survived worse. We've always found a way. We just need to reach Homelander, remind him of who he was before the corruption." "The entity you knew no longer exists," Norganon replied, his voice sad. "N'Zoth has rewritten his consciousness. What flies beside the old god now is merely a shell wearing Homelander's face." But Velen stepped forward, his staff blazing with holy light. "Perhaps not completely. I have seen the future through the light's guidance, and there are threads of possibility where redemption exists. Not for N'Zoth. That being is too far gone, too ancient in its evil. But for Homelander, there may yet be a chance. He is anomalous, remember. Perhaps that includes being anomalous in his resistance to complete corruption." It was a desperate hope, but hope nonetheless. Anduin rallied the champions around him. "We need to separate Homelander from N'Zoth. We need to separate Homelander. Get him away from the old god's direct influence, even for a moment. If there's any part of him still in there, any fragment of consciousness that remembers what it felt like to choose, we might be able to reach it." "A foolish plan," Sylvanas observed, but she readied her bow nonetheless. "Though I suppose foolish plans are all we have left." The champions of Azeroth launched their desperate assault. Not at N'Zoth directly, that would be suicide, but at Homelander. Thrall called down lightning, not to harm, but to disorient. Jaina created massive ice constructs that grabbed at Homelander's limbs, trying to pull him away from the old god. Vol'jin's shadow magic wove illusions, attempting to confuse N'Zoth's many eyes. Sylvanas fired arrows that trailed chains, trying to physically tether Homelander to something other than the old god. For a moment, it seemed to work. Homelander was pulled away from N'Zoth's side, the chains and ice constructs and lightning creating enough of a barrier that the old god's direct influence weakened. In that moment of separation, something flickered in Homelander's void black eyes. A spark of blue, his original eye color, trying to surface through the corruption. "Homelander!" Anduin shouted, pouring every bit of his command voice into the cry. "I know you can hear me. I know you're still in there somewhere. You made a choice, a wrong choice, but it was still yours. You can make another choice now. You can fight this corruption. You can choose to be more than N'Zoth's puppet." The spark in Homelander's eyes grew brighter, spreading. His face contorted, struggling, as if two consciousnesses were fighting for control of his body. N'Zoth felt its grip weakening and roared in protest. tentacles reaching out to reclaim its prize. But the champions doubled their efforts, holding the old god back just long enough for Homelander to experience a moment of clarity. In that moment, Homelander saw himself as he truly was. Not the god he had always claimed to be, not the hero his costume suggested, not even the villain he had become in his worst moments. He saw himself as a deeply broken individual, created by corporate greed and human experimentation, given godlike power but never the wisdom or character to wield it responsibly. He saw the trail of destruction he had left across 2 universes now. The people he had hurt, the trust he had betrayed, the potential he had wasted. And for perhaps the first time in his existence, Homelander felt genuine remorse. Asterisk. No. Asterisk. N'Zoth's voice thundered in his mind. Asterisk. You are beyond such petty emotions. You are my herald. You are corruption incarnate. You are asterisk. I am nothing, Homelander whispered, the words cutting through N'Zoth's control like a knife. I've always been nothing. Just a scared child in an adult's body. Given powers I never earned. Worshipped for attributes I never developed. I'm not a god. I'm not even a good man. I'm just a waste of potential. The admission, the genuine self-awareness, did something unexpected. It created a kind of immunity to N'Zoth's corruption. The old god's power fed on pride, on delusion, on the gap between what a being believed themselves to be and what they actually were. But Homelander, in his moment of absolute clarity, had closed that gap. He saw himself exactly as he was, without illusion or self-deception, and in that brutal honesty, there was nothing for the corruption to grasp onto. The void energy began to recede from his body, the tentacles that had been writhing across his costume dissolving. His eyes cleared, returning to their original blue. And with that clarity came a terrible realization of what he had done, what he had almost unleashed upon this world. I'm sorry, he said, his voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I've ruined everything. I've destroyed everything I touch. You were right to want me gone. You were right about all of it. N'Zoth, sensing its champion slipping away, made one final desperate move. It lashed out with every ounce of its power, not trying to reclaim Homelander, but to simply destroy him out of spite. Tentacles capable of crushing mountains wrapped around Homelander's body, squeezing with force that would have atomized a lesser being. But Homelander was still anomalous, still invulnerable. N'Zoth's physical strength meant nothing to him. The old god's void magic couldn't affect someone who no longer believed in their own superiority strongly enough to be corrupted. For the first time since its imprisonment, N'Zoth encountered something it truly couldn't destroy or control. The Titans were right, Homelander said, his voice steady now despite the old god's assault. I don't belong in this universe. I never did. But before I go, I'm going to do one thing right. He turned his heat vision on N'Zoth itself, his eyes blazing red. But this time the beams were different. They carried not just heat, but intent. The full force of his will focused on a single purpose. He wasn't trying to destroy the old god. That would be impossible. But he could hurt it, could drive it back, could buy the Titans the time they needed to reinforce its prison. The beams burned into N'Zoth's central mass, and the old god screamed, a sound that shattered windows across 3 continents. It was pain, yes, but more than that, it was frustrated rage at being denied. The tentacles released Homelander and retracted, N'Zoth withdrawing back toward the depths from which it had emerged. Now, Amon Thul commanded, and the Titans acted as one. Their combined power reached down, grabbing the retreating old god and forcing it back into its prison. New chains materialized, stronger than before, forged with lessons learned from Homelander's breach. Ward upon ward upon ward sealed the cavern, each one designed with redundancies to prevent a single anomaly from breaking through again. Within moments, N'Zoth was imprisoned once more, perhaps even more securely than before. The void energies receded from the surface, the portals closed, the corrupted creatures dissolved back into nightmare. Azeroth began to heal, the land itself sighing with relief as the immediate threat passed. Homelander floated above the ruins of Stormwind, alone now, the center of attention, but not in the way he had always craved. The armies, the champions, the titans, they all watched him, waiting to see what he would do next. "I'll go," he said quietly. "Back to my own universe. I'll accept exile. But I need you to understand something first. I can't promise I'll be better there. I can't promise I'll suddenly become the hero my costume suggests I should be. I'm too damaged, too broken. But I can promise I'll remember this. Remember that there are forces in the multiverse beyond my power. Remember that being the strongest doesn't make me right. Remember that some things, some people, are worth more than my ego." Anduin stepped forward, his young face showing wisdom beyond his years. "That's all any of us can do. Remember our failures and try to do better. You have been given a gift today, a chance to start over, with knowledge that few possess. What you do with that gift is your choice." The Titans began to weave reality around Homelander, creating a portal back to his home universe. But before it fully formed, Velen approached as well. The ancient Draenei placed a hand on Homelander's shoulder, and for once, Homelander didn't flinch away from the touch. "The light shows me possible futures," Velen said softly. "In most, you return to your world and nothing changes. You forget the lessons learned here. Return to your old patterns. Remain forever empty despite your power. But in a few futures, a small handful, you make different choices. You use your strength not to dominate but to protect. You seek not worship but genuine connection. Those futures are harder, more painful, because they require you to be vulnerable in ways your power has always let you avoid. But they are also the only futures where you find what you truly seek." "And what do I truly seek?" Homelander asked. "To matter," Velen replied simply. "Not to be feared or worshipped, but to genuinely matter to someone. To be valued not for your power, but for your choices. That is what all truly strong beings seek, and it is the one thing power alone can never provide." The portal fully formed now, a swirling vortex that would return Homelander to his own reality, to the exact moment he had left. As promised, the Titans began to restore Azeroth, healing the wounded, repairing the damaged buildings, even returning life to those who had died in the chaos. It would be as if Homelander had never come to this world, at least physically, but the memories would remain. The lessons learned, for both Homelander and the people of Azeroth. Sometimes, the greatest threats come not from malice, but from emptiness seeking to be filled. Sometimes the most dangerous beings are not those who embrace evil, but those who lack the capacity to recognize good. Homelander flew toward the portal, then paused at its threshold. He turned back one final time, looking at the assembled champions, at Anduin and Thrall and Jaina and all the others who had faced him despite the impossible odds. "Thank you," he said, and meant it, "for being strong enough to stand against me, for showing me what real strength looks like, for giving me a chance even when I didn't deserve it." Then he was gone, pulled through the portal back to his own universe, back to his own problems and his own choices. The portal closed behind him, sealed by the Titans to prevent any future crossing between realities. Azeroth was safe, at least from that particular threat. In the restored Cathedral Square, now pristine as if nothing had ever happened, Anduin stood with his advisors. "Do you think he'll change?" the young king asked. "Will the lessons he learned here make a difference?" "Perhaps," Velen replied. "Or perhaps not. But we gave him the chance. Sometimes that is all we can do. Offer the opportunity for redemption and hope it is accepted. The choice was always his, just as all meaningful choices must be." High above, the Titans prepared to depart, their work complete. But Amanthul paused, looking down at the mortal realm below with something approaching fondness. "This world continues to surprise us," he said to his fellow Titans. "These mortals, so fragile individually, yet so resilient collectively, they faced an anomaly we could barely comprehend. and they found a way to reach it. Perhaps there is something to be learned from them, about the value of hope over certainty, of compassion over judgment. Indeed, Ionar agreed. We ordered this world, gave it structure and purpose. But perhaps the most important thing we gave it was the freedom for its inhabitants to make their own choices, to find their own meanings, to create their own strengths. The anomaly came seeking godhood, but found mortals who needed no gods because they had each other. The Titans faded from view, returning to their vigil over the cosmos, but their words echoed through the minds of those who had witnessed the day's events. Azeroth had faced an impossible threat, and survived not through superior power, but through unity, compassion, and the unwavering belief that some principles were worth defending even against overwhelming odds. And in another universe, in a penthouse apartment overlooking a city that would never know how close it had come to losing its greatest hero to another reality entirely, Homelander stood before a mirror. He looked exactly as he had before the portal opened, his costume pristine, his hair perfect, his face unmarred by any sign of the battles he had just fought across dimensions. But something had changed. He saw himself differently now, not as the god he had always claimed to be, not as the hero his corporate masters had marketed him as, not even as the villain he sometimes suspected he was becoming. He saw himself as what he actually was, a deeply flawed individual with extraordinary power, standing at a crossroads between different possible futures. He remembered Velen's words about the futures where he made different choices, where he sought genuine connection over worship. They had seemed so impossible when spoken, requiring vulnerability and honesty, and all the things his power had let him avoid for so long. But they were also the only futures where he found what he truly sought: to matter, to genuinely matter to someone in a way that wasn't based on fear or awe or corporate branding. Homelander touched his reflection in the mirror, his invulnerable fingers leaving no mark on the glass. I can't promise I'll be better. In I want of I round, he whispered, echoing his words to Anduin. But I'll try. For the first time in my life, I'll actually try. Whether he would succeed, whether he would remember this resolution when faced with the temptations and frustrations of his old patterns, remained to be seen. The future was unwritten, full of possibilities both dark and bright, but for the first time since his creation in a laboratory decades ago, Homelander understood that he had a choice about which future would come to pass. In Azeroth, life continued. The Horde and Alliance returned to their uneasy truce. The dragon aspects resumed their vigils. The champions dispersed to face new threats and challenges. But they all carried the memory of the day they had faced an impossible being from another reality and won, not through superior strength, but through superior character. It was a lesson that would echo through Azeroth's history, retold in taverns and chronicled in libraries, a reminder that power without wisdom is merely chaos awaiting direction, and that the strongest beings are not always those with the greatest abilities, but those who make the hardest choices in service of something larger than themselves. The sky above Stormwind remained clear, no longer torn by dimensional rifts or void corruption. Children played in the streets, merchants hawked their wares, priests preached about the light's mercy and justice. It was an ordinary day in an extraordinary world, a world that had once again survived the impossible and emerged stronger for it. And perhaps somewhere, in the spaces between realities, where the Titans maintained their eternal vigil, they smiled, because they had learned something from their encounter with the anomaly, that sometimes the greatest threats are also the greatest opportunities for growth, understanding, and the reaffirmation of the principles that make existence worthwhile. The anomaly had come to Azeroth seeking to be worshipped as a god, but had instead learned what it meant to be mortal, to face limitations, to experience genuine consequences for his actions. And in that learning, perhaps both he and Azeroth had been elevated, each changed by their encounter in ways that would ripple forward through time. The sun set over Stormwind, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the world turned peacefully on its axis. Another day survived, another threat overcome, another chapter in the endless story of Azeroth complete. And in a penthouse far away, In a universe untouched by magic, or titans, or old gods, a man in a cape watched his own sunset and wondered if he had the strength to become something more than what he had always been. Only time would tell. But for the first time in both universes, there was hope that the answer might be yes.